And I think you mentioned that Qantas now has 3 of the longest routes in the world. One of them that I think they launched for the first time last year was their flights from Perth to Rome. Now, these are very clever because one, it was a flight to mainland Europe, but secondly, Qantas, and kind of kudos to the sort of marketing team for this, is that they did it in such a way that you could book return from Perth to Rome, but you could mix it up with a London flight. So what you could do is, say, fly to London, have a week in London, travel around Europe, end up back in Rome, and then fly back to Perth. That has been renewed for next year as well. Jake, tell us a little bit more about this, because this is a flagship route for Qantas.
Yeah, so Perth to Rome has been brought back for this season. So they're going to be flying 3 times per week between Perth and Rome until October. That's more than 22,000 seats over 4 months. Early July, we're going to see the flights for 2024 going on sale, and that will extend the route into the 3rd year of operation. Some figures from last year. This was one of the most popular international routes in 2022. Over the month of July last year, it saw 97.7% seat utilization on inbound services. 91.9% on outbound services. Also, the only direct route between Australia and continental Europe.
It is extraordinary how successful that was. Now, some of those extraordinary numbers were that kind of post-COVID pent-up demand. A lot of people that flew last summer, that would have been their first kind of long-haul trip post-COVID. But nonetheless, that's incredible because to give you sort of context, and it does vary, if you're an airline and you want to make money, you need to be selling out at least kind of 80% of those seats, 75, 80% of those seats. To get to that kind of number is almost unheard of. And also keep in mind that the reason it isn't probably 100% is that you can usually always get one seat on a plane if you want to spend enough money. And airlines will tend to leave some leniency that if somebody wants to do that. So effectively, for months, every single seat was booked. It is almost certainly the most successful flight in Qantas' history. I mean, there's probably many different ways you could argue that, but certainly as a one-off route, it was an absolute game changer.
Well, absolutely. And I think, back to when I was a wee lad, Qantas used to fly to Frankfurt, to Rome, to Paris, to a number of European cities. And then as things progressed, they kind of slowly dropped out of continental Europe and focused on London. And this is what I guess this is where the Middle Eastern carriers and Asian carriers have been successful, that operate via a hub into continental Europe. Aussies don't want to go to London to get to Europe. London is like LA airport for me. Avoid, avoid, avoid. If you're not going, and I know no insult to the motherland.
Get out.
No insult to the motherland. But if you're not going to spend time in the UK, why would you transit London?
Yeah.
So Qantas is effectively forcing customers to transit London in order to get to greater continental Europe with their codeshare partners. Opening up Italy or opening up Rome, and Jake, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that press release also mentioned that they've got plans to launch Paris again from the East Coast or something.
I didn't see that in the press release.
I think they are, because they've got one more 787 due to arrive in the next few weeks, which means they're going to have 3 more 787s than they had last year. They are in discussions about potentially launching a Paris route. So like Chris says there, they're essentially, they're aiming to, or they're looking at the possibility of having London, Paris and Rome as their 3 destinations.
Yeah, absolutely.
As an aside as well, by the way, something that came out very recently as well is Turkish Airlines is in conversations with Sydney and Melbourne to operate flights to Istanbul. So
Melbourne won.
Did they?
Yep, Melbourne won. They announced it yesterday, I think. So commencing, I think it's December this year, potentially.
Well, there you go. You heard it here, maybe second. But getting back to Qantas, it was mentioned by Cam Wallace, the CEO of Qantas International, that one of the trends they've seen post-COVID is preference for direct flights is higher than ever. And he's saying strong customer demand for long-haul international routes that's what gave them the confidence to recommit to this for 2024. One
of the interesting things is we've spoken on the podcast before about Project Sunrise, just to go back, and whether punters essentially would want to put up with being in economy for 20 hours. But Qantas, one of the reasons they're investing so heavily in that is the success of these routes, is seeing how well London to Perth did and how people would, and I don't want to use the phrase put up with, but seem more than happy to do ultra long haul routes rather than having the stopover. I personally prefer a stopover, but it looks like from what Qantas is seeing, I'm very much in the minority.
Oh, look, personally, I prefer a stopover, kind of my limit now on an aircraft, 7-8 hours, and I'm like, get me off. But
we shouldn't really be saying this on an aviation podcast. You just said here on an aviation podcast, 7-8 hours, I want to get off the aircraft.
I want to get off the aircraft. I'm happy to then get off, stretch my legs, have a shower, freshen up, and then I'm happy to get back on
the aircraft. But
by the 7 or 8 hour mark, I'm like, okay, because I don't sleep on an aircraft.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I'm not one of these people that can just get on and like put their head against something and fall asleep straight away. I envy those people. Now, is it because I was cabin crew for so long? I'm so used to being alert on an aircraft. But when I'm on board, I can't just even when I'm up the pointy end. So I guess I've been ruined there. So 7 or 8 hours is about my limit now. And then I want to get off, stretch my legs, maybe even have an overnight stop somewhere. But I'm happy to get back on the aircraft to continue a journey. But just an ultra long haul has no appeal to me.
Jake, where do you stand on this? Do you think ultra long haul is the way forward, or do you think people are going to want to have a stopover?
I think, and to be absolutely boring, I think there's a real market for both.
Oh God! That's the last thing we want on this show. Strong opinions.
We want division. We want people who. I think ultra long haul flights are literally Satan. But I think the business travelers especially are going to want to the ultra long haul because they can be at their destination as quickly as possible. I think for more casual travelers and holiday makers. The ultra long haul flights are going to be more expensive, and so if you get a stopover in Singapore or Dubai or whatever, that's going to knock a fair few $100s off the cost. And as Chris is saying, you also get off and spread your legs in an episode. In an airport like Changi or Dubai, which crammed with services. I've been to Dubai airport; it's absolutely insane. I flew in there in middle of the night, and everything was still open and buzzing.
City within a city.
It is. So there's definitely a market for both, and we're seeing with places like Changi, and Changi is a destination in itself, really.
Absolutely, beautiful airport.
When Alan Joyce was talking about buying the 12 A350 to do Project Sunrise, one of the points he made, which was really clever, is almost no other airline in the world could do this. Perhaps Air New Zealand potentially have a similar thing, because obviously Australia and New Zealand are a long, long way away from a lot of other major OECD countries. And so only Qantas would want to buy 12 of these aircraft and can therefore get the better deal and get the economies of scale. And so ironically, Qantas and to a lesser extent Air New Zealand, despite being relatively smaller airlines, are arguably doing the most exciting things in global aviation right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And all that being said, I do have to say these ultra long haul flights, anything that helps you avoid LAX, I'm all for.
I agree. London and LAX, avoid.
There's nothing wrong with Heathrow is a good airport.
Not if you're transiting. If you're stopping and going to visit family or friends in the motherland, absolutely, it's a great airport. But if you're having to transit London to get to Frankfurt or Paris or somewhere else, hell no, avoid.
For those people listening to the audio-only track, Chris is looking at me with a disgusted look. It really is. I mean, I'm not angry, I'm disappointed that you say this.
I loved flying into London, but my end destination was London.
Exactly. I mean, what? Sorry, what?
But if you're going beyond the UK and you're purely there for a transit, LA and Heathrow airports are the worst two airports for a transit.
Well, on that appalling note, we're going to go for one more break.